All right. So the good news is that we have an emerging tradition here in Canada. We have a little bit of cultural nuance leaking into our daily life, and it seems to emerge whenever there is a culturally inspired festival going on. That's the good news, and something you would expect from such a diverse and inclusive place. Normally, I'd say that's incredibly good news. That's very, very good news. But let me tell you something. When Canada says it wanted tradition and multiculturalism, and to welcome new people into our borders so we could learn their traditions and cultures, we didn't mean that they should bring illegal guns and commit murder at a selfless festival on St. Clair Street in Toronto. That's not a good tradition. If we can export pineapple on pizza, hockey, and the telephone, I'm pretty sure we can successfully export ritual sacrifice. That's not a very Canadian tradition. It's not, we actually eliminated that one a long time ago. So not very Canadian at all. July 13th, 2026. This is the original comic reporter, and I have the unenviable task of trying to explain this tragedy. We're not going to do it conventionally because we don't do anything conventionally here on the original Comics Reporter, but yes, it's true. There are 2 dead and 6 injured on St. Clair Street in Toronto. And yes, if you were wondering, the shooters were indeed known to police, and yes, the guns they were carrying were illegally obtained. If that story seems familiar to you, that's because it fits the pattern. You have a dude in Vancouver killing 11 people by driving a vehicle through a Filipino festival, and while, yes, I'm sure he had mental health issues, lots of people who have mental health issues don't drive vehicles through multicultural festivals. And then you have another 2 dudes shooting up a Latino festival in Toronto with illegally obtained weapons, and I'm sure they will likely also have mental health issues because these people always have mental health issues, whether they have mental health issues or not. But the bigger issue is that if you take those 2 tragedies and you add all the other ethnicity targeted events like synagogues, burning down churches, it actually starts to look like there is an effort to destabilize the peaceful calm Canada spent the last 150 years trying to construct. I'm not sure at this point if I care whether anyone dies during the violence or not. There is clearly a pattern where a certain class of people are drawing benefit by promoting violence that makes Canada seem like a very dangerous place to live. And it's not. You know what? Let's take it one step further. Let's not forget the school shooting in BC that was also blamed on the shooter's mental health. That one's a little harder to argue because clearly it's when a dude walks through the school wearing a dress carrying a rifle, you you tend to see mental health issues there, right there on the surface. But you also have more incidents of law enforcement allowing crimes to happen despite all of the necessary warning signs and numerous cases of illegally obtained weapons being used to commit crimes, while politicians tell us how little they understand about where this violence is actually coming from. Right, right. You have no idea where this violence could possibly be generated from. Yeah. Like I'm sure now Look, I'm sure none of our MPs have any idea what might be driving all this super confusing and definitely not political motivated violence. It's a mystery. It just comes out of nowhere. The good news is that most actual Canadians don't appear to be involved in perpetrating the crimes, choosing instead to be, except for one. That kid was Canadian. But Canadians are choosing instead to be ritually sacrificed for the glory and ambitions of those who look on and do nothing because they seem to think they are serving some kind of ancient Sumerian deity by allowing the destabilization to continue and sending us our hopes and prayers from their ivory towers, because sending hopes and prayers from an ivory tower, is how you preserve your political capital. Apparently. Yes. All the things that are quickly becoming tradition in Canada happened in this scenario. One, criminals were released from prison. That's new tradition number one. Two, criminals that were banned from weapons still got them illegally. That's tradition number two. No one knows exactly how they got them, and I'm sure our government was not involved in the acquisition of said weapons. I would never suggest that. Shame on anyone who thinks that our politicians are good, who are good people. Uh, Um, and I will show you proof of their goodness momentarily. And three, two people were killed with said mysteriously obtained illegal firearms at a cultural festival because that is tradition number three that we are attempting to establish successfully. Listen, we are just stacking up the traditions here now in this great nation of ours. And the good news is that it appears all of these new traditions are being enabled by our political class, which I think is great. I'm not sure this is the right approach, but setting up a new identity for Canada is definitely something we needed. I think it's great that our political class is doing so much to cement that they think ritual sacrifice might be the next great unifier of Canadian identity. That is a great signifier of political will, but I'm not sure I agree with them. But at least they're trying something. There is a fourth tradition making its way into the Canadian zeitgeist, and that is our MPs here in Canada sending their heartfelt thoughts and prayers for every tragedy that ever happened everywhere around the globe because they are extremely empathetic to those who have to suffer for their dedication to human dignity and forgiveness. That is what I mentioned earlier. That's how you know Anita Anand and all of our other politicians are all amazing people who we should all strive to be more like. Now, we've come to expect this kind of performative nonsense from our Toronto influencers as they all suddenly discover that they are somehow related to one of the two victims and now are morally obligated to fundraise for them because family, of course. We expect this out of them. We don't expect this kind of attention seeking behavior from those with the ability to help deal with the problem or those who helped create it. Sorry, we're not buying it. We don't buy the influencers either, but we definitely don't buy Anita Anand. Now, out of curiosity, does anyone out there think that there is any resemblance between pineapple on pizza, the telephone, playing hockey on a frozen pond while horribly inebriated, and ritually shooting up cultural festivals that have been occurring without incident for 20 years straight? Because these things seem very different to me. One seems like a tradition, and one seems like sacrifice done ritually. These are two very different things in our culture. Let me just put this all in perspective for our political class because I don't like to get political, but I will talk to anyone no matter how out to lunch they appear to be. So let me just speak directly to our politicians here. We don't like this tradition. We don't care about your hopes and prayers, and I'm sure you're not feeling any kind of joy. I'm sure you're not feeling the joy it feels like you're feeling about these random acts of kindness we're seeing from those who you continually show an empathy for by putting them back on the streets to continue their very important work of establishing tradition in Canada. I'm sure your hundreds of tweets expressing remorse and denouncing the shootings as bad are sincere, but many people are wondering why, when you have the power to make sure that these things happen far less often, you instead decide to go after legal gun owners while continually working in pursuit of Canada-wide chaos and destabilization. I'm not suggesting you're doing it on purpose. I'm just saying the downstream effects are pretty clear. It's weird. We can't really see your plan. I'm sure one exists, but we can't see your path, although you do appear to be on one, and no one has been able to explain what's really going through your head, and no amount of tweeting is really going to make any of this better. So we're just wondering, when do we get to keep these people in jail once they're arrested? When does that start to happen? And I should point out that most of the Latinos or Latinx, as they seem to enjoy being called, if I'm mistaken about that, please correct me in the comments. I should point out that most of the Latinos that were in attendance at this festival are actually full-fledged Canadian citizens. And the shooters, from what I understand, actually weren't. That's awkward, you know? That's a very awkward thing to find out. That means they were allowed out of jail, arrested, released, got weapons somehow, probably not given them by anyone in power, I'm sure, and then decided to go down in a hail of bullets because that is the tradition they want to establish in the Ontario capital of Toronto. And they did it in a festival to celebrate how welcome the Latinos are in Canada, because the way we show that is shooting up their festivals with illegal weapons from people who probably shouldn't have been here in the first place. That's how do you feel welcome? Glad you feel welcome. And I know there will be those out there who say ritual sacrifice, that's hyperbole, comic. You're being extremist. That you're using hyperbole to make it worse than it is. That language is not welcome in our country. Ritual we don't do ritual sacrifice. You're right, that's the problem. But the problem that I have with people who push back on the ritual sacrifice framing is that I use for this tradition we're establishing is unfortunately but that's actually what it is. It's ritual now. It's and it is sacrifice. We've sacrificed too. I'm assuming innocent lives. I don't know the identities, so maybe they aren't innocent. I don't know. We sacrificed two lives for the ritual of diversity and inclusion at a festival celebrating diversity and inclusion. So yes, at this point, shootings at multicultural festivals are in fact ritual sacrifice. I don't know what god we're worshiping. I mean, is it Baal? Is it Moloch? Have we really figured out what God we're worshiping yet? All we really know as citizens is that we have ritual sacrifice happening at our cultural festivals, and our politicians seem to be ritually making tweets about how much they regret the violence that happens when the ritual sacrifices are carried out. That's kind of odd. That's odd. My bet is that we're worshiping Ishtar, but that I made a video about that, but that is as of yet unconfirmed, so don't quote me on it. Ishtar just makes sense to me. If you know anything about Ishtar, you'll understand why it makes sense. It does. Ishtar seems to be the one Canada has dedicated itself to, but I'll need to do more digging into that to confirm it. If anyone knows which ancient Sumerian god we are pleasing right now for sure, I'm sure all of Canada would like to know because our politicians won't say who it is, and we would like to know. And we would like to know because if the shooters are actually working on behalf of an ancient Siberian, ancient forgotten deity who survived for generations in relative obscurity, only to find its way back to relevance among those who make their living in Ottawa, then we'd like to know its name before we find ourselves fully dedicated to this tradition, because we as citizens need to know who we are ritually sacrificing people to, because when we pray, we need to know what God's name to use. And we need to know. If you could tell us which evil deity you have stirred up, please let us know so we can help them help you. We don't want to think that all these sacrifices are just for nothing. Anyways, in what I'm sure is unrelated commentary, I would personally like to thank Bell Telecommunications for joining in on keeping Canadians safe by sending out a nice little text message this morning reminding us that if we wanted to learn how best to call 911 in case of a violent incident, all we had to do was visit bell.ca and they would teach us how to either press three numbers on our cell phone or push the emergency contact button. Yeah, that was a real text message sent by Bell, most definitely in response to the tragedy at St. Clair Street in Toronto, which is quickly becoming another tradition. Corporations treating Canadian citizens, who are considered the second smartest population in the world by the entire planet, by the way, treating Canadian citizens like we can't do the simplest tasks without corporate oversight. I appreciate the sentiment, Bell, and I know you have to protect your shareholders, but also, I don't think you need to educate Canadians on how to properly call 911, nor do I think that would have helped here. The cops at the festival did an amazing job of only allowing two deaths despite the shooter's best efforts, and in no way does Bell Telecommunications get to inject itself into this event as if it had any role to play at all. Unless you're telling us you wanted to add some funding, Bell, or maybe do some advertising. Is that what you're trying to tell us? Because I feel like that might be a little bit awkward. Look, if our politicians worshiping an ancient Sumerian deity like Ishtar seem pretty extreme to you, good. good, that should seem extreme to you. It might be true, but it's probably not true. Conspiracy is one of those wonderfully effective ways of blaming something that doesn't exist for the sole purpose of escaping accountability. Using nut bars as a shield against accountability is a truly tried, tested, and effective method of making sure that you, as a power that be, never have to face accountability for your actions. I thought we learned our lesson with Jeffrey Epstein, but apparently I gave people too much credit. I hoped we'd learned our lesson with Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein files when it came to dealing with accusations of worshiping ancient Sumerian deities and performing human sacrifice in the name of the economy or personal gain through ritual means. I truly hoped we learned our lesson, because not every conspiracy needs to be explained by injecting the divine. In fact, one might even contend that the divine isn't even needed to justify the most conspiracies, because most conspiracies have a base of truth and don't lose that basis in truth until you add the ancient Sumerian deities. In fact, the more add to it, the more likely people are to ignore it. So yeah, let's get ahead of the story here. There is no ancient Sumerian deity leading our politicians into allowing acts of ritual violence against their own people. The WF is entirely made of human beings and not necessarily lizard people. And everything they're doing appears to be being done for political and economic gain because that's what humans do. Most of the racism in Canada, for instance, is imported, and the mental health issues aren't half the issue we're told they are. That is just an excuse to be both horrified and empathetic at the same time. And quite frankly, even if the shooters are mentally ill, I'm not sure I care. Take them away, study them, sacrifice them to Moloch. I don't care. Do whatever you want with the shooters, whether they are mentally ill or not. No Canadian citizen will have a problem with that. And if they do, they'll forget about it in like 5 minutes. But most of all, can we please start throwing away the key when you catch a violent offender instead of just releasing them to get armed and then acting shocked when they commit a violent crime you had every reason to believe was probably going to happen? We knew it was going to happen. You're the expert. Chances are you knew it was going to happen too. Because there is only so much sacrifice Canada can be expected to make, ladies and gentlemen, and not one of those sacrifices should ever be ritual. This is a tradition Canada doesn't need. This violence is something Canada doesn't want. We like our violence performative. Let's keep our sticks on the ice and our gloves on the bench. So go out there and enjoy your cultural festivals. Pay attention to those around you because you never know when you'll have to dodge a bullet. Just remember, those bullets are not guided by any ancient Sumerian deities. Those are supplied by the very people you trust to protect you. Anyways, that's the rumor. Good luck.